Hi, I'm Barb Rosenstock, and I'm the author of many picture books for kids. Here is some of my books, in case any of you have ever seen them at school. There's a couple, like Camping Trip That Changed America, and Ben Franklin's Big Splash, and the newest, Leave It to Abigail, that are pretty popular. Thomas Jefferson Builds a Library, pretty popular in school. But today, I have heard that it is R for Russia Day. And I have a book that is set in Russia. It was called The Noisy Paintbox. It's by me and illustrated by Mary Graham Prey, who also illustrated the Harry Potter books. And Mary and I in this book tell the story of a Russian boy named Vasily Kandinsky. Oh my goodness, look at how long his name is. Vasily Kandinsky. And if you had a long name like Vasily Kandinsky, you would probably need a nickname. So his parents called him Vasya. So in the book, I call him Vasya instead of Vasily. Now, Vasily Kandinsky, or Vasya Kandinsky, grew up to be a very famous painter. And here's some examples of Kandinsky paintings that you may, oops, I think I have that upside down, that you may have seen before or seen in school, especially in art class. So these are the kind of paintings that Kandinsky wound up doing as a grown-up. And they're called abstract art. And Kandinsky is one of the first artists who did abstract art. He's considered the father of abstract art. But before that, long before he was a painter, hopefully like a lot of people listening, he was a kid. This is Vasya Kandinsky at about 7 years old. So he was born in 1866, in December 16th, I think, 1866, in Moscow, Russia. Now, when he was born there, Moscow looked kind of like that. And right now, though, that exact same scene in Russia, just so you know, looks kind of like this. Pretty much not too different except for the cars, right? So Vasya was born in Moscow, but around the time of this picture, he moved with his family to live with his aunt all the way down south in Russia to the Black Sea, to a town, or actually more of a city, called Odessa. And this is what Odessa looked like when Kandinsky lived there. He lived there from about the time he was 5, I think all the way through high school, if I'm not mistaken. Now, around the time he turned, I think about 7 or 8 years old, his aunt gave him a present. Somebody, if you have a nice auntie, sometimes they get you gifts. Well, his aunt gave him a present. Now, Vasya's aunt gave him a paint box because, as you'll hear, she thought it was part of being a proper boy, was to learn how to paint. And the paint box might have looked something like this. It's just a small wooden box with all kinds of colors in it for him to use. This is a child's paint box from around the same time. Although when Kandinsky got his paint box, he found out something amazing. And sometimes it's a part of the book, the Noisy Paintbox, that people think is made up. But this is one of the major parts that's true. Is Kandinsky, when he first started painting with this paint box, he began to hear colors. And it turns out that Vasya didn't know it, but he was born with something called synesthesia. Sounds like a disease, but it's not. It's more like a superpower. Synesthesia is when people can do 2 or more of their senses kind of happen, experience them at the same time. Some people can taste letters. Some people can smell numbers. And in Vasya's case, he could hear colors. So for an example, he saw the color red, in his head, he also heard, and if he saw the color yellow, in his head, he would hear a sound something like this. Oh my goodness. And it is true that there are many, many people, like 1 in every 5,000 or so people have synesthesia. They can do 2 or more senses. They have the experience of 2 or more senses at the same time. Now, when Kandinsky realized he could hear colors, of course, he loved to paint. And you will hear more about that when I read you a part of the Noisy Paintbox. But as he began to paint, and he would show people his paintings and say, I can hear colors, his family probably was like, what? You can hear colors? No, you can't. Stop being silly. So Vasya never really became much of a painter when he was a kid. Instead, he kind of did what everyone thought he should do. He went to law school at the University of Moscow, which looked like that when he attended, and now it is much bigger. This is what the University of Moscow looks like now. My goodness, what a huge university. But he was a lawyer, then he was a law professor. A few years after he graduated law school, he just decided to kind of take a big trip and learn more about his country. So he went up north of Moscow in Russia to what's called the Vologda region. And the Vologda region is a very folk, kind of a traditional region in Russia. The people still wear, at the time, they still wore very traditional, very colorful costumes like this. They did a lot of embroidery, and this is some of the embroidery that influenced Kandinsky later in his art. And there were these really cool decorated houses there. I love these. And this is some of the houses in the Vologda region in Russia that are decorated. Well, Kandinsky came back from that trip, still spent some time as a lawyer, but the idea of doing art just kept coming back to him and coming back to him. One day he's in an orchestra concert and he starts seeing, as he's hearing the music, he starts seeing crazy shapes, wild shapes in his mind, and he decides to be a painter. Now, as he got older, he started painting. This is Kandinsky, much older, in front of one of his famous paintings. And because he loved, at that point, when he was a painter, at this point, he lived in Munich, Germany, because that's where he went to study painting. He kind of left Russia altogether, but he kind of never left Russia in his heart. He did everything from very realistic, pretty realistic for Kandinsky, views of old Russia that look like this, to these are some pictures of Russian landscapes of Moscow, actually, later on when Kandinsky did abstract art. There's one right there, and here's another one right here. So that is how Kandinsky saw his hometown later in his life. And now, which is a lot different. You see how this is very realistic, right? This is what he was looking at. And this is what he wound up painting. And all of that came from his aunt giving him a Noisy Paintbox. So I am going to read to you now just a little bit of the Noisy Paintbox. So here we go. The Noisy Paintbox, The Colors and Sounds of Kandinsky's Abstract Art by me, Barb Rosenstock, illustrated by Mary Brown Prey. Vasya Kandinsky spent his days learning to be a proper Russian boy. He studied bookfuls of math, science, and history. He practiced piano scales to the marching click of a metronome. He sat stiff and straight at dressed-up dinners while the grown-ups talked and talked and talked. Look, even the fish is bored. Vasya's well-off world was perfectly polite until the day his aunt gave him a small wooden paint box. Every proper Russian boy should appreciate art, said Auntie. She showed Vasya the correct way to mix colors on the paint box palette. Vasya mixed red with yellow. Then he mixed red with blue. As the colors changed, Vasya heard a whisper. Hiss. Louder. Hiss. Louder still. Hiss. What's that sound? Asked Vasya. I don't hear anything, said Auntie. Vasya listened as his paintbrush stirred and swished. The swirling colors trilled like an orchestra tuning up for a magical symphony. Mama, Papa, called Vasya, what a noisy paintbox. Silly Vasily, said Papa. You stop being foolish, said Mama. Vasya painted the sound of the colors. And the book goes on from there to tell you all about Vasya Kandinsky, his life in Moscow and in Munich, and then back in Moscow, and his paintings, and how he learned to listen to his own heart, look through his own eyes, listen to what he was hearing, and create some of the world's most famous abstract art. So I hope you liked that little part of the story that is about Russia, about a boy from Russia and a boy who Russia influenced. So if you want to read more about the Noisy Paintbox, it should be probably in everybody's library. And you can be at your bookstore, local bookstore, or online, wherever you use. And I will hopefully talk to you guys sometime again. It was nice talking to you for Art for Russia Day. Thanks for reading the Noisy Paintbox with me, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.